Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Psychedelics Today. This is Joe Moore coming at you from Breckenridge, Colorado, recording this on Memorial Day, May 31. And today on the show, we have Marcus and Amber Capone of VETS. They are doing really important work, and read this little story from their website. VETS was founded in 2019 by Marcus and Amber Capone in response to the growing veteran healthcare and suicide crisis. Marcus, a retired Navy SEAL, left the military in 2013 after multiple combat deployments. Marcus and Amber soon realized that the subsequent years would be wrought with escalating hardships, misdiagnosis, a broken veteran healthcare system, and desperation to find a meaningful solution before it was too late. We recorded this a few months ago, and I've been a fan of their work for a bit now. They do kind of a combination of 5-MeO-DMT and iboga or ibogaine, and they work with some really cool doctors and practitioners. It's a nonprofit, so everything you donate goes to help this project and gets people treatment. Typically, the treatment's overseas. The results are pretty incredible from this protocol. So there's so many veterans with so many issues, and they need help, right? We need these people to be back and part of our culture, not, just suffering out there trying to work through these psychiatric meds that they don't really want to be on often. Sometimes they need to be on them, but I think with appropriate research and treatment, we can, get people back to normal in a few sessions here. Some folks, obviously there's going to be plenty of folks that still need to be on psych meds all the time, but if we can avoid that, that's great. Of course, we want to be on less meds. And the turnaround is incredible. Like the result that Marcus can kind of describe here and Amber goes into is pretty incredible. I really, really like this organization and hope to do some partnering with VETS in the future. So thank you, Amber and Marcus Capone, for being on Psychedelics Today. Happy Memorial Day, everybody. And I think that's it for the intro. Again, if you want to support us, you can leave a small monthly donation at patreon.com/psychedelics today. Smallest $2 a month. And we appreciate every one of you out there that's doing that already. And another way to support us, just tell a friend about a favorite episode, or check out our classes, psychedeliceducationcenter.com or psychedelicstoday.com to learn more. All right, everybody, we'll see you on the other side. I hope you enjoy this episode of VETS. Their website is vetssolutions.org, VETS solutions.org. And yeah, we'll see you on the other side. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Psychedelics Today. I am joined today by Marcus and Amber Capone, who run an amazing nonprofit called VETS. Thank you both for joining me today.
Thanks, Joe. It's nice to be here.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm curious if you could tell me a little bit about what VETS is. What does VETS do?
I would love to tell you more about VETS. VETS was born out of our own introduction to psychedelic therapy, which came after Marcus's transition out of the SEAL teams. And after many years of failed interventions and addressing some of the post-war challenges, we stumbled upon psychedelic therapy really as a last-ditch effort, and it was so effective. Marcus immediately wanted to pay it forward to his buddies and teammates who were also experiencing these same sets of challenges. And so it was born really out of desperation. It morphed into a very skeptical, cautious grassroots movement that caught on fire. And before we knew it, we found ourselves caught up in a really promising, amazing adventure, really. It's been absolutely incredible. So we founded VETS in 2019 after a very successful about 2-year grassroots proof of concept phase. And to date, Marcus and I have raised funding to provide funding support to around 300, maybe just over 300 veterans at this point, and some spouses that are seeking psychedelic therapies as a way to heal from the invisible wounds of war. And we find that that's twofold. There's psychological, PTSD, of course, you hear about all the time. There's also a physiological invisible wound and traumatic brain injury that doesn't get nearly as much coverage, but probably causes maybe more suffering.
Mm. Yeah, that's amazing. And what are the psychedelic compounds of choice for vets?
So we actually can provide funding for 6, and funding would be in resources, which is direct support to veterans that are seeking these therapies outside of the U.S., or research being done inside the U.S. And the 6 modalities that we can support are ibogaine or iboga, 5-MeO-DMT, ketamine, psilocybin, MDMA, and ayahuasca. Most of our grant recipients are pursuing the same protocol that Marcus did back in 2017, which is ibogaine and 5-MeO-DMT. But we've actually written grants in 2020 and 2021 for ayahuasca and ketamine, quite a few ketamine grants recently, just I think due to COVID, the travel restrictions and the immediate relief that ketamine can provide. So yeah, starting to see some branching out, which is really cool.
Yeah, that's outstanding. Great. So rewinding the clock a little bit, at a certain point, people don't need these interventions, right? They're kind of going about their day, hopefully high performers and whatever you're up to. And yeah, I'm kind of curious, Marcus or Amber, if you could speak to kind of the before state, like, high school or right before you jumped into the Navy, what your performance kind of looked like relative to maybe what it looked like after. I hope that's not phrased too insensitively. If we can reframe that if we need to.
No. Marcus, you want to take that?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I grew up a scholarship athlete, so I went to university on a full football scholarship, and I never had any issues really, at least in my mind, growing up. I had some anxiety. I think that was just part of playing sports. And so when I graduated, I don't want to say I was a bit lost, but I was a bit scared to step off into the private sector. And so, I think that I found the SEAL teams through, Discovery Channel episodes and books that I've read. And it's something I focused on throughout my last year of college. And so once I graduated, I enlisted in the Navy, I think 6 weeks later. At that time, we had our first son. Amber and I got married, and then off I went to boot camp. And so, just going back to the mental health, I don't think I've ever experienced anything until I was probably about 10 years in. I don't think I ever considered myself a high performer. I was good enough to do everything that, I was able to. I think just towards some of the tail end of my military career is when I started really experiencing things that I hadn't experienced before: depression, isolation, headaches, forgetfulness, thoughts of suicidality. And, these were uncommon. These are things that I never experienced before, and I don't know why I did. And so, finding these treatments really, I think, made me more aware, gave me perspective. And, what we think is it may be doing something physiologically to the brain, which is pretty exciting.
Yeah. That's one of the most exciting parts. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I always saw Marcus through eyes of adoration. He was going to be humble and say that he wasn't a high performer. I always saw him as being able to do anything. And, he did a lot of that. He did, so many things that he put his mind to. He's always been great with a goal. And I saw him kind of fizzling out and not really having the next goal, or trying to muster up a goal, but not necessarily fully able to achieve it. And that was new to me. And of course, we went through a gamut of brain clinics as well. And I remember him coming home from one of them and saying, today they found that I have trouble with memory, recollection, balance, and coordination. And I was like, well, I know you're forgetful. I don't know why. He's 30 something, maybe 40 at the time. But balance and coordination, that's not you. That's not normal. That's not okay. So yeah, what he's referencing in terms of the physiological component, goes back to probably his history of playing football as well as his history of working with explosives, and not necessarily even, having to have a history of working with explosives or, playing a contact sport. There are veterans that, have some of these invisible brain injuries only detectable post-mortem that have never done either. So, we're particularly compelled by the, TBI / physiological component of psychedelic therapies, and the decrease in his performance didn't seem like something he was necessarily choosing. It was happening to him, and I was watching helplessly. So, finding these therapies has been, it's felt like almost a miracle.
Mm. Right. So, Marcus, can you give us like an idea of what like an average day of training looked like? I'm sure that's not a really great way to put it, because like average for SEAL teams is probably higher than I can even imagine. But like what kind of stuff would you do on a typical training day? And like, balance obviously being a big part of that. But yeah, like what did that look like for you?
Yeah. So, initial training, SEAL training, BUDS, what it's called, it's you're just doing a ton of physical evolutions throughout the day, and you're doing that for about 6 months. And so the idea is to see who actually wants to be there mentally, physically, emotionally. And so, if you're not, running around, you're swimming, you're running, you're carrying stuff on your head, you're doing push-ups, sit-ups, the idea again is just to weed out the individuals that really don't want to be there. Once you get through that phase, I think the shift is more on your mental state, and they want to see if you're smart enough to be there, if you can make decisions, if you're emotionally sound. And that's just, that's, if you want to call it, boot camp for SEALs. Once you get past that, you go through some advanced training, and you get to what they call your platoon. And there is really where you start actually learning to be, a real operator, you want to call it. Learn how to shoot and skydive and drive, different types of vehicles, learn different communications and radios and things like that. And so, you're gone a lot. You're gone over, I'd say, 250 days a year, and you're just constantly training. It's there's if there's no war, there's no big game on Sunday, and so I'd say you're just in this consistent cycle of learning. If you want to call it beating your body up. I don't think it ever felt like that at the time, but again, I feel like towards the latter part, even though I only did 13 years, it started to take a bit of a toll, both on my brain and my body. I don't know if that helped.
Yeah. And do you think there was like literal micro tears from things like mortars or kind of larger ammunition?
The research is saying yes. Is that the years of either minor blast exposure, minor TBIs through pulling the trigger and training over and over again, thousands of rounds. That was a breacher, so I was around a lot of explosives, small, medium-sized explosives, some large explosives. And, they're saying all those subconcussive blows, the overpressure was really damaging to the body. And so, honestly, I don't even know where I'm going with this.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah. So everything I've heard, like it's almost like it's getting people on the way to CTE. Anything from, firearms to water skiing can lead to that kind of thing.
And I guess, history of contact sports before that, may have something to do with it. I don't know.
That makes sense. Yeah. Okay. So what kind of bled got you interested in this topic? Did somebody approach you or is this just kind of word on the street?
I can speak to that. Are you talking about like the TBI topic or just psychedelics?
Psychedelics in general. Like, how did psychedelics creep in?
Okay. Well, let me rewind just a bit. because we were experiencing a lot of just the transition challenges that so many military families face, but it was kind of like progressing over time. And so intuitively, I just felt like this shouldn't be getting worse. It should be getting better by default. And I felt like he was, we were being good soldiers and good patients in terms of, getting prescriptions, taking medicines, keeping up with doctor's appointments, things like that. But there was really no forward progress. And it felt like as time went on, there was a prescription for a symptom and another prescription for another symptom. And there was just nothing but prescriptions. And during the height of our struggles, one of Marcus's former teammates took his life. And I'm so grateful that his wife had his brain autopsied. And for the first time ever, it was released in the SEAL community that there was a microscopic injury called interface astroglial scarring. And it's only detectable post-mortem. And, these were his symptoms. There were 2 giant articles around Memorial Day in the local newspaper. And suddenly, after reading those, everything made sense to me. It hit me like a million pounds. And I was like, this is very likely what we're dealing with, but it's being misdiagnosed as a psychological condition. And this is very much physiological in nature. And so still being, a good soldier and taking a Western approach, I started getting him into brain clinics. And that was almost creating more frustration because he was putting in so much time and effort to go to these places and spend weeks away from home. And there was really no takeaway on the back end. There were some supplements, there were some, flipping upside down in chairs. There were a lot of tests and batteries and, diagnostics, but not necessarily a lot of hope. And so I felt like time was running out and we really just needed a Hail Mary. At the same time, I was becoming absolutely exhausted with living this and fighting this and, trying to come alongside him and, just there was not a lot of reciprocation. And I thought, I can't continue like this. I've got to leave. I've got to get my kids out of this environment and, our kids. And I felt like by doing that, it could end very badly and they could have to live with the consequences of that for the rest of their lives and their kids' lives. And I just thought there's got to be another thing. I was spending a lot of time, like quiet time, just praying and thinking. And I remember that one of our friends had gone outside of the US and I didn't even know what it was. I mean, I didn't know anything about psychedelics. I didn't know anything about ibogaine. I didn't know anything other than someone we trusted was having a similar set of challenges and found relief through something crazy. And so I contacted him and very much behind, Marcus's back behind the scenes, I was getting everything in place for him to also have this opportunity. And he was very reluctant. I had mentioned it to him about a year earlier. And he was way more comfortable at that point with a Western approach. And so feeling like we had nothing left and it just needed a Hail Mary, I revisited this topic, kind of gave him an ultimatum. But I said, at the time, I will fight for you every day for the rest of my life. You've got to fight with me. You've got to try this. And he agreed. And so that was really the extent of, the due diligence we did. He definitely did research, before he went down, and he can speak to that. But it felt very like this is it.
Mm. So if this doesn't work, it didn't feel like you had anything else.
Nothing else. No,
right.
Nothing else.
Yeah, it's pretty tragic. And, I'm hoping your project can help bring more attention to this. Are you seeing any kind of movement with groups like the VA around digging in? I know they kind of recently did some exploratory spending in conjunction with DARPA, maybe.
Yeah. There are a lot of rumblings and I've talked to providers within the VA who they're a little, hamstringed, I guess you could say, of, wanting to help, but the VA is a giant bureaucratic system. And so there are plenty of providers in there that want to do better, but their hands are tied. You have people like Rachel Yehuda, various practitioners within the VA that are really doing amazing things. And I do think that in due time, this will become a movement, and the VA will hop on board with some of these more alternative therapies, I guess. I feel like, the veteran suicide epidemic is not getting better. If anything, it's getting worse. The numbers are absolutely atrocious. And we really feel that this will go a long way in ending the veteran suicide epidemic. And, the healing is twofold. It's very much, psychological in nature, which psychedelics are commonly researched for and known for. But the physiological component too could be kind of a 1-2 punch for the signature injury of the conflicts overseas, which is TBI. There's not a lot of hope around TBI. And so there's not a lot of talk around TBI. So we're trying to just get out, and just start a new dialogue, change the narrative surrounding psychedelics, but also start a new dialogue on root cause and the potential for psychedelics to address both.
Yeah. It's really interesting to me that very few groups are talking about the, structural improvement of brain health, actually, healing this stuff. It's puzzling.
Yeah. In fact, whenever, this was my biggest takeaway. Like, I feel that ibogaine and 5-MeO are, really what we know best. But in terms of, feedback from grant recipients, Marcus's experience, et cetera. But we hear consistently that there's improvement in 3 key areas, which is trauma, any sort of addiction, which in many cases, alcohol use disorder amongst veterans, and then the return of neurocognition and, cognitive functioning. So this seems to be a really effective treatment for special operators who have this so many blast exposures. I think that, over time, the research will show that the physiological improvements are going to be phenomenal. And when we first started this in 2017, it was almost like, oh, don't say that, don't suggest that, don't hypothesize that. Yet that was the biggest takeaway for me, that there was a cognition improvement, knowing that TBI was really the root cause issue here. I was like trying to shout it from the rooftops, like, this is the problem and this could be a solution. And I was told at that time, like, oh, don't say that. If you've ever had a TBI, you're not a candidate for psychedelics. So luckily, Dr. Nolan Williams from the Stanford Brain Stimulation Lab was like, yeah, there's something there. And so as soon as some of the COVID restrictions are lifted, we're partnering with Stanford on a study to look at the potential physiological improvements with the use of ibogaine.
That's really cool. Are you looking at doing kind of before and after imaging scans?
Exactly. Yeah. They're going to do a battery of psychological measures as well as functional MRIs before and after ibogaine.
That's amazing. Okay, so before we get too far into all this really cool stuff you're doing, I'd really like to hear from you, Marcus, on like what was it like going? You had to go kind of out of the country to get treatment. Like, what was this whole process like for you? Like, it's got to be kind of challenging, given it's really different from Western medicine in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I mean, I was a little fed up that I really felt like I wasn't getting better, as Amber mentioned earlier. And so for me, I would have tried anything at this time. And so when this approach was brought up, I was, of course, a bit skeptical because I didn't really understand it. I thought it was, I thought psychedelics were party drugs. And so, and I'm still struggling with that. But until I read enough and realized that, these were medicines used in mental health therapy, it made me feel more comfortable understanding that, maybe these will work. And so, after enough research and trying just about everything else, I said, why not? And so I went ahead and went to the clinic outside the U.S. and,
Was it like a little nerve wracking going into this kind of really weird environment?
Yeah, I had a great therapist. I think she really helped. I think she really
Hmm.
helped with the journey. The journey was tough, but I don't want to say I wasn't scared. I was definitely a bit nervous, and but also, I was also a bit excited because I had heard how many individuals had gone through before me. Not necessarily veterans, but just others that were experiencing similar symptoms that I was, and so I was, I had positive outlook on what the outcome was going to be. I didn't know that the experience was going to be so tough, which it really was, and so that was that was a bit challenging.
Yeah. Right. It's really hard to prep for these big experiences. And that's in medicine, we often talk about this idea of informed consent. Like, how much can you educate the person about the procedure so they understand? And with
Yeah,
psychedelics, I
you
feel like
can't.
it's nearly impossible.
You can't. I don't think you can. I don't think you could explain psychedelics what it does. I mean, you're opening your brain, really. You're tapping
Right.
into higher levels of consciousness that you just can't. You can't explain to others, and so unless you do it, and then the majority of people that do it the correct way, they're changed forever in a good way. And
Hmm.
so, yeah, as Amber mentioned earlier, once I came out of the experience, I felt, as I see with every other person that goes through, just the need to share and spread the knowledge of what these medicines can do for an individual, especially an individual suffering from depression and anxiety, or alcoholism, or drug abuse, or just being stuck, handcuffed,
Hmm.
if you want to call it. Yeah.
How long did it take you to feel settled after the experience?
Right away. I mean, you kind of have this glow for weeks on end. It's almost immediate. With some people, actually, some people it takes longer. Some people have such a rough time; they're trying to figure out, I don't say what was real and what was not real, but that's part of it. And also, a lot of people get their body armor ripped off from them. You get stripped naked. Your ego goes away. You're not Superman anymore if you thought you were before. It really humbles you, and I think that's important
Right.
because it kind of shows everybody that you're not you're not that important, really. You know, and
Mm,
I just think it's like I said, it's life changing.
right. Yeah. And, how did you, what was the most noticeable or easiest to communicate, like, kind of difference that you felt, before the treatment to after?
The things that you thought were so important are really not that important.
Okay. Like
It's
total
just,
reframing of the
yeah,
world
it's
view.
I think that's a better term, reframing. Or if you want to categorize like what's important at the top and what's not important, you really can shuffle those around when you're done.
Mm,
And so some of the things that you may have been really having anxiety over, or really stressing over, maybe some of the things that you were depressed about, that you were thinking about in the past, you kind of realize that that really doesn't matter anymore. And so the less I don't use care, because I want to be careful here and say you just stop caring about things, because it's not what it does. You stop caring about the things that you really don't need to care about. And those are the things that are really not that important. And that's what I think I got out of it.
right. Yeah. Like in my life, it's, just crazy arguments with people at work, back when I was doing software full time forever. And, psychedelics would just clear that all out. Or like
Yeah.
strange relationship bugs, all gone. At least the worry around it.
Yeah. And you can't fix other people. That's the other part that I learned
Yeah.
coming out of that is, those individuals that are going to be that way. I just, I don't answer their call anymore or answer their text. That's the other thing you realize is that some of those people are toxic, and you don't need them in your life. And And again, if you're trying to rack and stack what's important, what's not important, some of those get pushed to the bottom of that list, and eventually they just go away. And it helps.
Yeah.
It helps you live an easier life, not trying to satisfy everybody, but just take care of the things that are really right in front of you and what really, really matter most.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I've definitely had to dump a number of friends too. It's like, if you're not spending an appropriate amount of time with your family, like, why am I spending time with you? Like, dealing with bullshit that doesn't make me happy at all. So I think that's right on.
I think the drinking too. I mean, I think drinking was such a part of our lives prior, and it's a tough habit to kick, especially when it's pretty much been part of my life since high school, I would say, in terms of fun, and so that's a tough pill to swallow. That that's not the sole focus of everything anymore, and you got to either fulfill that with something else, or so that was another piece that I thought psychedelics really helped with, is that I just didn't have the same urge before, and I stopped drinking for a long time. I went back to it, and I mean, I didn't go back to it anything close to what I did before. Now it's more social, but now it's not even. I don't even enjoy it anymore, like I used to. Now I almost feel like it's a habit that I can easily get rid of. So we went out for sushi the other night, and I ordered a drink off of sheer habit, and I had the first sip, and it was disgusting. And I just said, why am I even drinking this right now? And I said, you know what? It's just from years of just that was normalcy, But yeah, it didn't even taste good. I didn't even enjoy it. And again, I owe that to my experiences. I've had several.
Yeah.
Marcus brought up a really good point, which is that it creates a lot of space. And, one of the stigmas that we're also trying to break in the military and veteran community, because these therapies are so untapped or unknown amongst this population, is it's not a magic bullet. You don't just, leave the country and get cured and come back and go back into the same environment and live the same life with no problems. It's like it clears a lot of space, and Marcus has done a really amazing job at filling that space with really good things. And I deal with all of our grant recipients, and so those that I've seen do the same are having higher rates of success. I think everybody would go back to that week or weekend and say that's when my whole life shifted. To what degree is largely dependent upon that individual. So it's the veterans that are coming back and implementing mindfulness, meditation, breath work. I mean, Marcus does a whole ton of things: cold showers, eating right, supplements, working out, staying on schedule, and holding himself accountable. So, that high performer, in my eyes, the high performer, I know he would say otherwise, is back. And now his performance optimization is not necessarily in a competitive environment on a sports team or in the SEAL teams. He's very much competing with himself and not only staying at this level, but always looking to attain higher levels of health optimization. So the psychedelic therapies just give a nice reset. And we call them at VETS foundational healing. So we give, foundational healing grants, because it lays this foundation and opens up this space so that you can stack so many other things on top. And what we've seen in the veteran, special operations community is that all of these, guys are high performers by nature. And so they almost start competing with one another. Like, oh, if you're doing yoga, I want to do Kundalini yoga. If you're doing meditation once a day, I'm going to do it twice a day. Keto diet, intermittent fasting. They've become like these biohackers. It's so cool. So cool.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And I think that's a health, turning health into kind of a competitive thing, or happiness into a competitive thing. It's like a really cool angle.
Totally. Totally. It's the ripple out effect is incredible. By getting back to this level of attainment and performance, they're not only feeling better, they're impacting everyone around them, whether it's their families or just society in general. And that creates, the sense of, I don't know, not competition necessarily, but it just creates this happiness that's contagious and makes everyone else around them want to perform at that level as well. I know that I can say that for myself. And, the shift in our family dynamic and, whether it's our relationship with our kids to our kids, also setting goals and attaining them, that's a real thing. There's so much healing happening beyond just the veteran that we're supporting.
Mm. And Amber, can you talk about what it was like to get Marcus back home from the treatments? Like, was it interesting, scary?
I can speak to both of those things because it was both, and it was also extremely rewarding and, fulfilling. And there was a huge relief. I think my immediate reaction was relief. I had actually flown in the day after him. So his ibogaine had gone all through a Friday evening, and I flew in on a Saturday evening. And I was so scared to see him because this was very foreign to me. And we had pursued this in desperation. And so I had really no idea what to expect. And I had a little bit of a freak out, like, oh my goodness, is this going to change his personality? Is this going to change our marriage? What am I walking into? And so I've told this story before. I heard him walking down the hall, and I just felt like my heart stopped, and like, this is it. This is it. Whoever comes around the corner, let's just pray for the best. And I felt like I was seeing him for the first time when I met him, because his countenance was completely different, where before he had a lot of negative energy and you could feel that. He was just as cool as a cucumber, which is why I fell in love with him. He was so easy to be around, and he was so just cool. And I felt like he was back. In the days following, there was definitely that afterglow, but I really didn't have a playbook on what to expect. And so if he had a bad day, or if we weren't fully communicating like we were, that first day, I got scared. Like, is this going to last? Is this too good to be true? And so, there were definitely times that I freaked out in terms of, our interactions. But I think the biggest freak out that I had was when the dust settled and we were back at home, and it was like, what did we just do? Mm-hmm. I didn't know necessarily what we were getting into. And so it seemed so anti-Western medicine. It seemed so anti like my upbringing and what was normal and okay and acceptable, that I actually had to really work through weeks of, what was this all about? And once I did that, I became super convicted that these therapies are saving lives. And I completely shifted my conditioning to see them for what I believe they are, which is a plant put on earth by God that serves a purpose. And, the purpose here is to relieve much, much suffering.
Right. Yeah, it's a really big deal. And what has it been like sharing this with people? So you've been sharing it with a lot of families, veterans and their families. And
yeah, not only sharing it with veterans and their families, which, there's safety in that because you almost don't have to explain. There's just this unspoken understanding, trust, support that exists in the veteran community and the SEAL community in particular. And so that hasn't necessarily been the challenge. That has been a blessing. The challenge has been to share this on a national stage, because it is, kind of the antithesis of the ego driven, everything's good here, nothing to look at, way of, our community. And what really convicted me to start sharing was the funeral of one of my best friend's husbands who took his life at 21 years. He was an active duty SEAL. And at that point, our goal was for 12 other SEALs, friends, to have the same outcome as Marcus did, and for 12 months to pass. So we knew it would work for more people than just Marcus and that it would last. And Chad took his life at the 11 and a half month mark. And I was sitting in his funeral feeling like maybe, having talked about this would have prevented this. But it was so uncomfortable to do so, even in our community. I just became super convicted that we had to share, we had to take this message forward. And we started by doing that in our community. And by, gaining and maintaining the trust of the community, we've become insulated in taking the message further and further and further outside our comfort zone. It is not easy to share vulnerability, but what we've come to realize, or what I personally feel, is that vulnerability is actually the greatest show of strength. And so, here we go. We just keep on telling it and keep on doing it. And it just has unfolded in the most miraculous, amazing ways. And, lives are being saved. Families are being restored. We have to.
Right. It's a moral imperative, really.
Absolutely.
I see no reasonable argument whatsoever that would, allow us to just back off of this.
I've tried. All along the way, like it's a lot of hard work. It is very uncomfortable. Has been, more so in the beginning than now. But I feel like every time I try to get off the path, I just get put right back on. And so I've come to really feel that this is kind of my life's purpose. And as difficult and uncomfortable as it is, it's happening. And I'm just committed to seeing it through.
What has been like the strongest institutional pushback you've seen so far?
I think, I've honestly been so amazed and surprised actually by the level of support that we've received. I haven't necessarily felt like there's been a strong pushback. I feel like there's that maybe people, whether it be military leaders or larger military foundations, organizations, maybe felt like, oh, this is the flavor of the month. This will fizzle out. This sounds crazy. But as more and more successful outcomes are being shared, we've really gotten the attention of people that we otherwise would not have. And it's not necessarily pushback. It's more like, tell me about what you're doing. I don't know if you're aware, but the Navy SEAL Foundation made a $50,000 donation to MAPS.
Oh, I think I saw that. It's amazing.
Back in November. So, there's definitely change happening.
Right. That's big progress. And have you seen anything in your religious communities, like pressure from doing psychedelic stuff like this?
No. And you may or may not know that I was raised in a very conservative Christian household. My faith is a huge part of my life. And it's actually, I feel, kind of what birthed this for me, really just surrendering and sitting in quiet time and remembering this therapy and, really just praying for a solution and then having received it and going in a freak out mode of like, oh my goodness, what did we just do? And then having to recondition my beliefs that this is, a plant that God put on earth, that, those that are using it are looking for healing. Those that are using it might need a little bit more of a powerful punch. Those, who am I to say that what its intended purpose was? When did I start believing that a plant was a drug, but a pill was a cure? All of these things that I had to go through this reckoning with. And I think, at first glance, not having been in a position of desperation And having been raised in a conservative Christian environment, I probably would have said, like, oh, that's crazy. That's not for us. Until you're so desperate that you would do anything to save someone you love, you really can't say what you would or wouldn't do. So we found ourselves in this situation. My prayer was answered. Someone's life was saved. Many lives have been saved. Families have been restored. I look at myself and I would look at any other Christian and say, how is that bad? I've really, really become convicted in my stance for this. I'm never going to put God in a box of what healing is happening with plants on this earth. I'm just not going to do it. So, I haven't had a lot of conversations with other religious, leaders, but I welcome them because I'm so convicted.
So Harvard Divinity School has a big project going around psychedelics and clergy. I'm running a really interesting 4-week series right now with clergy. We're calling it Connecting Clergy. So getting priests and ordained folks involved and educated a little bit more and connected.
Nice.
So there could be some really interesting outcomes in the not so far off future around this stuff.
Absolutely. On a side note, Joseph Barsuglia said we should go on psychedelics today and talk about Christianity and the psychedelic movement. And I was like, yes.
Oh, we'll have you at the conference then. I think we're doing one in at some point this summer, a Christian psychedelic conference.
Oh my gosh. Count me in for that.
All right. Yeah, you're on the list. And it's just exciting to see what types of priests are actually actively doing stuff. Some high level, I don't want to call them high level, but priests that run pretty big cities are taking part in Santo Daime and other, psychedelic type services. It's really interesting to me.
It is interesting. It really is. I need to, I guess, do more due diligence on what's actually happening. I've got my head down working on VETS, constantly. So I didn't realize that. That's really exciting.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a really great thing. I think largely the conversation has been triggered by Brian Murarescu's book, where he tries to argue that early Christianity, kind of what he's calling proto-Christianity, the first 300 years or so, there's probably a lot of psychedelic use.
I can't say that I haven't thought back, in reading my Bible or whatever, and thought, I wonder, like, that sounds a lot like what I'm hearing out of these weekends in terms of, like visions and whatnot. But I don't know. I'm not, who am I to say, but it is very compelling.
Yeah, totally. And, this, why I think the angle is really important is because I'm a little nervous about psychiatry really dominating psychedelics and perhaps making it too expensive or inaccessible. So the religious angle, I think, it could be really helpful there. Not only is like charity baked into Christianity, so perhaps we could be offering these services really inexpensively through church groups. Yeah. And all the peripheral services, right? Like integration and prep services and ketamine, like it's so cheap, like it should be $1 or less. And what does that look like when we can team up with a church and deliver it at kind of those prices, versus a $5,000 for 3 sessions.
Absolutely. Yeah. I totally hear you on that.
Yeah. Have y'all heard anything about ketamine for healing brain injury?
I am in regular contact with Dr. Jeff Camlett, who is doing ketamine therapy down in Florida. And he has a lot of, I don't know what his hypothesis is surrounding that, but he has discussed this with me. I don't feel educated enough on it to say one way or the other, but I know that it is being at least talked about.
Good. Yeah, I think the initial stuff was saying it was it did do the neurogenesis thing. I just haven't seen like measurements yet, like dose response and like how much healed. And I think partly that's because we're doing it in like petri dishes, not necessarily
Sure.
in real animals largely. But, your study with Stanford seems like it's going to really break ground. And if we could do that with a few other drugs, that would be amazing.
I hope so. I think it will. Everyone knows the psychological benefits of psychedelics, and yet the physiological benefits really are largely not even talked about, let alone researched. So I'm really, really excited about that. I heard a statistic, and please don't quote me on this because I don't know where it came from, but something like 80% of prisoners have a history of traumatic brain injury.
Oh,
And
wow.
I feel like this is just commonly overlooked. Our son suffered from back-to-back concussions during his high school football playing days. And he really struggled after that. Anyone with a history of TBI, whether it's falling on a bike or, going to war 10 times, it really impacts everyday living.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just, headaches and blurry vision. It really has an impact, and it can have a long lasting impact. So, pharmaceuticals are commonly prescribed to address the symptoms of TBI, whether it's, headaches or trouble focusing, trouble sleeping, anxiety, depression. But a lot of those pharmaceuticals have a risk of suicidality.
Oh, yeah.
So in terms of fighting the veteran suicide epidemic, that to me seems rather asinine to, fight the suicide epidemic with medications that could cause someone to act out suicide, when really it's just masking the symptoms of a traumatic brain injury.
Mm-hmm. Right. In a lot of medicine, that's really what's going on, right? Is masking symptoms as opposed to looking at underlying cause.
No doubt.
Yeah. That comes from a lot of places. It's largely not willful, right? Like doctors do want people to get better, but there's just a lot of stuff going on that makes it really complicated.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, beyond the Stanford project, are you looking at other projects?
So we're looking primarily at an internal data collection system for vets. So regardless of where our grant recipients go or what therapy they pursue, we can have IRB approved data collection from the get-go, store the data for future studies, numerous future studies.
That's great.
Yeah. So that's our primary focus right now, but we're also in talks with a researcher for a psilocybin study, looking at brain function. It would be amazing if our veterans could not only have these hero dose experiences and deal with trauma and, get a massive cognitive reboot, deal with addiction, whatever, but then have an ongoing microdosing protocol, whether it's ibogaine or psilocybin. That would be incredible. So yeah, we're looking at psilocybin right now. We have like 2 big studies on the horizon per year. We're focused this year on Stanford and the internal data collection. And then hopefully in 2022, we can move forward with the psilocybin study. And then I would love to do a couples MDMA study. I think, we're close enough to expanded access at this point that might not be feasible, or I should say close enough to legalization. But I feel like, we're so excited to add to the body of data, because that's what's really going to move the needle here in getting these therapies into the US. I think one of the biggest travesties is that you have a generation of soldier like none other. There are still men and women serving that were new to the military right around 9/11. And so 2 decades of sustained combat, 2 decades of the emotional, psychological, physiological toll that war has taken on them. They're just now coming into retirement age. What does the next half of their life look like? A lot of these veterans are in their early 40s. They have an entire next chapter. And right now that looks very cloudy because of the treatment options currently available in the United States. I feel like if we can really put our heads down and add to the body of research so that we can advocate for these therapies to be available inside the borders of the country that these veterans chose to defend, then we can not only help them in a more meaningful way, we can end the veteran suicide epidemic, and hopefully these therapies will be available to all Americans in due time, because they really are saving lives.
Right. Yeah. I love the conviction. And I totally agree with you. It's so unconscionable, like how we deal with these things right now. We're still putting people in jail, even for practicing their own religion, right? Which, that's kind of First Amendment stuff. So like the fact that that's still happening, and we still have so much further to go to improve our legal situation, can get a little disheartening. But when you look at the individuals who have been helped and think forward to how many can be helped, that really helps a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the flame just has to start in one spot, and then before you know it, it is spread like wildfire. We are living proof of that. And we're so excited about being able to take forward this message of hope. If anything, we want to give veterans hope that there is another solution beyond pharmaceuticals, beyond talk therapy, beyond the standard approaches that are currently available. And I think that just by giving them that hope, they can continue to hang on to fight another day. And, having, one psychedelic experience, laying a foundation for other layers of healing, like I mentioned before, it just starts this cascading snowball type effect. And before you know it, there's a wildfire in this one person's life, and they want to help their friends who are suffering and their families benefiting. And so I feel like, this could really create a wildfire across the United States and heal not only reach veterans and citizens, but, can heal some of the divides that are currently happening in our country.
Right.
And
I think that's a really big point.
Yeah. I think that's really exciting.
Right. It would it would feel nice to have a little bit more of a shared grounding to go forward with. As I've never seen something so fractured in my life.
I know.
Yeah, and we need to be together for this thing. This is, I think, historically one of the most important countries in all of history, and all of us play a part of it in it. And yeah, it's just really ugly to see where it is. And, there's just so many issues, right? Like the drug war, like as we talked about, issues in psychiatry and medicine, VA. Yeah. So we've got a lot to work on. So we need people back from the abyss in a lot of ways.
Yes.
All hands on deck.
No doubt. No doubt.
And how is VETS doing fundraising?
Fundraising is definitely the number one challenge for any nonprofit organization. Just the sustainability, is always in limbo. So if you have, one giant fundraise, it's like, cool, there's breathing room, but that inevitably runs out and you've got to do it again. Another thing too is, we've been described as being victims of our own programmatic success. And so, it's very difficult to keep up with the demand as word spreads. Veterans and their families, and many times are so desperate that they, they need help. They beg for help. It's so hard to say no. It's so hard when you don't have adequate funding. So fundraising is a full-time job. It's an ongoing challenge. But anyone who would be willing to give to VETS, I hope they know that they are directly impacting the lives of veterans and their families and saving lives. These therapies have been described. We did a retrospective study on the grassroots effort, and 96% of the participants said that this was like exceedingly better than anything that they had tried to date. And they had tried plenty of stuff. So, it's like everyone who comes through has such a profound experience that immediately they want to help their buddies or, friends that are struggling. And I get about 2 to 5 for every one grant recipient that we can support, there's like 2 to 5 referrals on the back end of that. So this has caused the program to like double, quadruple in ways that we cannot sustain. And in all honesty, like 100 organizations like us couldn't even begin to touch the demand. We can, we're projected to help 125 to 150 veterans in 2021. Last year, we were able to reach 110. 110, that's nothing in the big picture. So fundraising, yeah, super challenging. Hopefully we can get these therapies in the US. If we went away completely in 5 to 10 years, that would be a win.
Right. And have you explored any kind of alternative, like ketamine delivery models? Like, for instance, a doctor might just volunteer their time once a week at a clinic.
That's a really good idea.
No, possibly leveraging the nonprofit status to save them some tax money or something.
Yeah. Thanks for that idea. I haven't even thought about that.
Cool.
Although we work with ketamine clinics who are doing great service by discounting their services to help veterans. But like you said, there's still such an upside on ketamine. Even the discount is like, they're still making a lot.
That's one of my hopes with churches. Like they can pool together resources to operate a really low cost clinic.
I hear you.
Yeah, it's a hope. We'll see. Yeah, cool. And are you partners with any organizations you might want to mention?
We've had partner funding from various organizations who are super supportive of our mission. Some in the SEAL community, others in the special operations community. We had a donor match fundraising challenge from a very special partner called Change Reaction in 2020, which was really successful. So that is really a saving grace. Our donors have been amazing. We've had everything from someone who, gave $5 online to my grandmother who wrote a $30 check to, the 6-figure donations by amazing donors, most of them who are supportive of the psychedelic movement and see this as a very unique opportunity to support a very unique population who, is very credible on a national stage. And then, we've had amazing partnerships with a few organizations who have really invested in our mission. And they see that, like Marcus, for example, other charitable organizations over the course of several years provided 6 figures of funding for him to go to these brain clinics. Some of them were $20,000, $30,000 a pop. And he left probably more frustrated than he was going in with not a lot of answers. So they see that for a few $1,000s per veteran can really change someone's life radically, save someone's life. It is such an amazing investment. The return on investment, there's nothing like it. There's nothing like it in the veteran healthcare space. I'm pretty confident of that.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we provide all of the other mechanisms to ensure ongoing support, community. Part of the transition challenge is the loss of community and loss of purpose. So for those veterans that go through our pipeline, they immediately want to give back. They want to be a part of the program and they want the community back. And so we provide that. And then one of the other distinguishing factors, which is so important for any veteran that might be listening, considering psychedelic therapy, it's not like, getting a bag of mushrooms and doing, a trip on your couch by yourself. Like, it's not the same as going in with preparation and integration and having the support mechanisms to ensure ongoing success. I mean, this is such a new space for veterans that they don't really know what to expect going in. So our coaching team gives them all the adequate tools to prepare, to set intentions, to manage expectations, to, talk about practical things like, what do I wear? What do I take? And then on the back end, they help to navigate challenging experiences, talk through, what the takeaways were. What are they unpacking from this amazing journey or very challenging journey? And how do they navigate back into life? How do they tell their family members? We definitely want to give them all of the mechanisms for the best possible outcome. And so anyone who's donating to VETS is not only allowing us to provide funding to the veteran who's seeking these therapies, but it's also inviting them into our very special community and giving them the coaching support and community support for long-term success.
That's really great. And how do you find these coaches?
Oh my goodness. Our coach, our lead prep and integration coach, we met a few years ago, and she's such a unicorn. She has decades of experience in therapy, licensed marriage and family therapist, but she's working as a coach. So it's a completely different approach. And it also is not a regulated industry. So, coaching can go across state lines, et cetera. But she has, specialized psychedelic training, and she can speak to the medicines personally in some cases as well. And so she looks for coaches just like her, coaches that have, the history, the training, and the experience. And they also are familiar with veteran issues.
That's fantastic. Yeah, and really helpful. I'm glad that VETS is developing so well. And,
Thank you.
I really do hope other organizations step up and start doing similar work because the need is so big.
Yeah. It's a gray area, and there's a lot of need. There's a lot of impact, but there's a lot of the stigmatization still, as that exists. And then there's a lot of skepticism about supporting, or we appeal to to donors on both sides of the aisle, if you will, those that are definitely like more America, red, white, blue, patriotic. I would do anything for veterans, and those that are really, really just into the progressive nature of psychedelic science. And so, I feel like we've been a really cool bridge between the two worlds, and we've gotten support from both sides, of both extremes, I guess. And it's been incredible to see everyone pull together. But, there's still some hesitation to support these therapies, especially from those that don't understand them. So we've tried to switch up the narrative and humanize the messaging and get the success statistics out there so donors know they really are making an impact.
Yeah, it seems like you're on the right track on all those points, which is really great.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's I can only imagine how much work it is for you.
There was a lot of due diligence, about a 9-month due diligence phase before we launched VETS. And it was everything from, can we even speak about Marcus's treatment, to how can we best protect our donors and develop a model that will allow for sustainability, that we can go before Congress, that we can obtain 501c3 status, that we can help veterans in a meaningful way. And so with the careful modeling with our attorney team, we've been able to strike a really unique balance of being able to do all of that and have a really big impact along the way.
A number of my friends didn't want to get public around this stuff because it would impact their clearance and ability to, work for DoD or contracting organizations in the future. And have you seen anything like that or encountered any issues like that?
I have absolutely seen it. And I initially heard that a couple of the guys were like, it's not lying to say that you have done these, or you haven't done these therapies, on US soil, because they are leaving the country to do them. I just heard of someone who said, no, I told them I've done these therapies. They weren't in the United States, but I did them, and I'm off all my prescription meds. I wouldn't be here if I hadn't done them, because I wanted to put a gun to my head every day of my life. And I've referred X number of friends, and they've had the same experience. So what are you going to do about it? And he still has his clearance.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah. I don't know if that would be the case every time, but I was very happy to hear that.
met a person, I think at Canada's equivalent to the State Department, like a lot of clearance, and he was able to get away with it. Like straight up told the clearance person what he was doing because he was going internationally. He was fine.
Yes. Yeah.
I found that fascinating.
Yeah. I mean, I was really floored to hear it and really happy to hear it because it is a very big concern. It's, there's so many that are suffering. I've had guys contact me and say, like, I don't want to give you my last name. I don't want there to be any record that we talked, but I don't know if I'm going to make it unless I go through a treatment like this. And it's just so sad to me that you have, veterans that have given so much, have gone overseas every single time they've been asked, have been such good soldiers, and they can't get the help they need inside of the borders of the United States. So my thing is, when our lawmakers know better, they're going to do better. I'm going to choose to believe that. And we're going to do whatever it takes to get this right.
Amazing. All right. So we're a little over an hour here. I'm just kind of curious if there's any stories that might be helpful to fit in or any kind of data points that might be helpful.
I feel like I've talked a lot, so I'll let Marcus chime in.
Sure.
No, I don't have anything to add. Covered everything.
Right. Cool. Yeah. Awesome. And this is life-saving. This is really important. It's really an ethical, moral imperative in a lot of ways. And I do hope politicians and many others get it together so we can start moving this thing forward. And so many people need help.
Yeah, we're right there with you and feeling super optimistic about what's to come.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you both. And let's hang out for a minute to debrief and hope we get you on again in the future.
Awesome. Thank you, Joe.
And there you have it, Amber and Marcus Capone of VETS at vetssolutions.org. And I loved this conversation. I really believe in their mission. I think there needs to be probably, 100 more of these nonprofits, but, people need to be made aware first. This group is working with some great folks in PR and marketing, and hopefully we'll see it take off. I really hope this becomes a treatment for many people, because transitioning from military, deployments is tough. Coming back to civilian life is really hard. And this could really help many, many, many people. The numbers are staggering. So the more we can do, the better. And, the veteran suicide number is 22 a day is the rough number people talk about. It's probably more than that, veteran suicides in the USA. And globally, probably much higher, right? So please consider supporting VETS, learn more about their organization, and tell your veteran friends about the organization. They're doing important work, and the more people that know, the better. All right, everybody, thanks for listening. Again, throw us a small monthly donation if you want on Patreon, patreon.com/psychedelics today. Take one of our classes at psychedeliceducationcenter.com. We got a few free courses up there. And just tell a friend. Tell a friend about some blogs you've read on our site or your favorite podcast episode. All right, everybody, we'll see you next time. Thank you all for tuning in to this episode with VETS. And this is Joe Moore signing off from Breckenridge, Colorado for Psychedelics Today. See you next time.